Today, we have a very special guest. Allison Doss went from choosing drugs, alcohol, and prostitution to embarking on a journey of recovery and self-discovery. She is now a transformational coach, speaker, and author who shares her story to empower others. Allison, welcome to the Fieldswell Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I love the title of your podcast because it just bodes such good vibes.
Thank you so much. And we met at Jim Cathcart's CPE dinner in San Diego last month, and my sign is a butterfly. When I see a butterfly, it's always a reminder that I'm on the right path. And you have this beautiful butterfly tattoo, so here we are.
Yes, we are. I first saw you at the Eric Swanson virtual masterminds.
Yes.
And when I first saw you pop up on there, I'm like, oh, that's one of me's. That's a me.
That's a vibe. We're going to do things. We're going to go places together. I love it. Well, you have quite the story. Like, where do we begin? I think I'd love to start with your childhood. So if you could tell us a bit more what life was like for you growing up.
Have you ever seen Little House on the Prairie?
I haven't.
Okay, Little House on the Prairie was a show set in the 1800s, and it's this family of five that lives on this prairie. And Charles Ingalls, who was a big actor back in the 70s, was the father. And it was, they're very quaint, they're very loving. They live on this little house on the prairie, and I always perceived that that's what my childhood was like. But it was so far from it. I think every afternoon when I got home from school and finished my homework and watched Little House on the Prairie, I just kind of dove into what they were and who they were. And I lived in the fantasy world that that's what I was living. Mm-hmm. But that's so far from the truth. My dad was pretty aggressive. My mom, no shade, but was like a doormat. My dad ran over her, and he was aggressive towards me, but not my brother and sister. And my mom will continue to tell the tale that was my fault because I wouldn't mind the rules. She pretty much even told me last week when I tried to talk to her about how I wished that the narrative that was talked over me as a child was different. I was crowned the littlest and the meanest at about 3 or 4 years old. And wow. She said, oh, honey, we didn't just make that up. That's just how you were. You came out of the womb wanting to hurt people. And I thought at 48 years old, I don't want to hear that anymore. I really would like to be affirmed and confirmed that, hey, yeah, we probably could have done some things differently.
Right. We probably could have helped shape your identity when you were so young and didn't know any better.
Yeah. She goes, well, how else would you explain it when your brother and sister are passively and quietly in their rooms playing with their toys and you crawl in there and pull their hair, bite them, and break their toys? I'm like, I don't know, but I know there's some different words that we could have used. And she was like, back then we didn't put kids on medication or take them to the therapist. We just, said you were mean. And I said, yeah, Mom, I grew up believing that. And it shaped the choices and decisions and the relationships that I stayed in much longer than I should have because I didn't want to be mean.
It's a hard label to put on a child.
Yeah.
And so, I'm wondering, looking back, what do you think it was that you needed in those moments, that maybe you weren't getting or that caused you to seek it elsewhere?
Well, I obviously wasn't getting some type of attention that I was craving. My mom has told me that she suffered from postpartum depression. And she has even told me that when she got pregnant with me, she was mad. She didn't want to have another kid. So I have this theory that those types of chemicals of anger and depression are sent right to the womb. So I was born already not feeling safe.
Yes.
So I truly believe that. And I probably was just looking for attention and nurturing, and I probably needed more love and some positive redirection. But also, my dad was so proud of me that I was so mean because everyone said I acted just like him. So that message was a positive one. You're just like your daddy, and everyone respected my dad. I know now that there was probably more fear than respect. But I grew up and entered into relationships with boyfriends thinking that I had to have them fear me, which to me was respect me. So I too was very aggressive for most of my relationships.
You almost embodied that behavior your dad was giving off because he was getting respect for it, and you found respect by acting out.
Absolutely. And my mom and dad would always tell me, little girl, somewhere along the way, there's going to be somebody bigger and badder than you. And I was like, yeah, whatever. But we'll get to that. There was someone, and they definitely weren't big, but they definitely had nothing to lose.
Yeah. I want to get into that. I mean, I want to hear about, how this path led you to addiction and who this bigger person of you was that you ended up running into.
Yeah, I don't really believe that there was anything that made me want to use drugs or drink. When I
Yeah.
left the farm in Louisiana when I was like 17, it wasn't really a farm. We had a lot of acreage and we had horses and a barn. So in that essence, it was like a farm.
Yeah.
But I left there and went to Washington, D.C. because I thought that had to be the biggest and best place ever. And so I left my town of 500 people and went to DC, where I was just like, wow, this
Yeah.
is amazing. And within a couple of weeks of being there, I was walking around 18th and M Street, downtown DC, and I'm straight out of Louisiana, and I sounded like it, and I talked like it, and I had a face full of makeup and a little flowery skirt on, and I'm
Oh my
crossing the
God.
street, and this guy with a walkie-talkie was standing under this awning. And
Mhm.
he's like, Miss, come over here. Are you looking for a job? I'm like, yeah, I am looking for a job. And he said, come in, let's meet the manager. So I went into this place. It was really, really dark.
Mhm.
And there was a like 5 by 5 stage about 3 feet off of the ground. And there was a
Mhm.
naked girl on it. And she had a garter belt full of money. And she looked really tan, but she had a bikini on, but it was a naked bikini. She had like the best tan lines of anyone I'd ever seen. And I was like, it was like the Home Alone kid, you
Yes.
know?
Yes.
And
Little House on the Prairie.
yeah. And to me, it was exciting,
Mhm.
exhilarating, glamorous.
Yeah.
And so I was recruited at 17 years old to be a stripper.
Wow.
And that's when the drinking and the drugs started.
Yeah.
And I loved being in the fast lane, the
Mhm.
fast, like the
Yeah.
party scene. And that's what started that. So I don't think there was anything that like happened that made me want to get outside myself per
Mhm.
se. I
Yeah.
just really loved that fast party
Yeah.
life.
You fell into that scene and you were like in the spotlight, in the party life.
It was so
Yeah.
exciting for me. In my hometown, I was a big fish in a little pond, and I won all the awards for all the sports. And I was always like in the paper for something. And then when I
Yeah.
moved to DC, I was this tiny little fish in a big pond. But as soon as I
Mhm.
was immersed into this other lifestyle, being the 17-year-old girl from the South, I
Mhm.
was the most popular person in the
Yeah.
club.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is great.
So talk to us a little bit about the progression from there. I know stripper, like prostitution, escort, like what was that
Mhm.
life like for you?
I found it to be really exciting. I met a girl along the way. Her name is Kelly, and she was just like me. Loved the fast lane, loved the party. She was tall and blonde and danced and loved the clubs and house music. And we partnered right up.
Wow.
Like, we're doing
Yes,
this
buddy
together.
system.
It was so cool because I really had a chip on my shoulder because I'm daddy's girl. Like, I'm the
Mm,
aggressive,
mhm.
dominant, like, who you looking at? I'm going to headbutt you. Leave me alone. But she
Right.
was so different. She was like twirling my hair around on her fingers, like, oh my God, you're so pretty. I'm like, who is this girl?
Yeah.
But she just melted me.
She
And that's
softened
when,
you.
yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
And she and I took the train to New York City. And I'm like, what the hell are we doing in DC?
Yes.
Well, this is where
Yes.
we belong. So we moved to New York City, got a place in the East Village, and had turntables at our apartment, a disco ball, and fur covered countertops, and black light
Wow.
responsive paint. And we were
Yeah.
just doing the club scene. And of course, we were stripping there too at Scores, which back in
Yeah.
the 90s was like the celebrity strip club.
Hmm.
So I thought, hey, this is how life is supposed to be.
Yeah. Life is good.
Life is so good. And we did a lot of drugs and we drank a lot. We made a lot of money. And it didn't take long for stripping to become escorting. It was kind
Mhm.
of like what happened. I remember it used to be we could make a lot of money being on stage.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a time when a lot of girls from third world countries began to come to New York. And it seemed like they were more willing to do things that we didn't do before. So we all ended up having to compete with them. And
With
I
the
think
foreign
that,
girls.
yeah, and that was kind of like the shift. I mean, they were hustlers and they were sending money
Mhm.
home to their families, which much respect, you know.
Yeah.
But they were just willing to do things that we didn't do before.
Mm-hmm.
So to keep up, we did it too.
Yeah. So, the alcohol, the drugs, the sex, like eventually it led to some low points for you, which I know. And one of those led you to want to transform your life. Can we dive into that?
Yeah. Well, what we've spoken of so far is like my early 20s. I'm 48
Yeah.
now. The early
Oh,
20s,
we got more to cover. Let's go.
and
Bring us up to speed.
I got pregnant at
Yeah.
24 by my drug dealer,
Okay.
and because
Okay.
that's always a good idea.
Right.
And I had a little boy. His name is TJ. He's now almost 23, and so
Wow.
I had a baby in this lifestyle. So I had babysitters. There was a guy that I met that kind of came in to save the day. I ended up having another little boy with him. His name's
Okay.
Donovan, my youngest son. He's almost 17. And
Oh.
during the time from like 25 until about 35,
Mhm.
it's really blurry for me.
Yeah.
It's really blurry. There were so many seemingly rock bottoms that happened during that time,
Mhm.
but rock bottoms are very personal for people. Everyone's very individual as to what your rock bottom is. During that time, I had spent some time in jail for DUIs. I had had car wrecks and things just weren't great. And but anyone that
Right.
tried to tell me any different, like I had a problem, like you just didn't get to talk to me anymore. That's how
Yeah.
I
Cut.
controlled that
Cut.
situation.
Were you still living in New York City?
Yeah, still living in New
Okay.
York City. And my oldest son's grandparents had retired down to Florida. So when things would get really hectic for me in New York,
Mhm.
I would flee down to Florida and I could drop the kids off there and, and take
Wow.
off. And around the age of 32, 33, my best friend Kelly,
Mhm.
she had a really tragic accident. She was on the roof of her building in New York City, and she had been up for days and was on drugs and stuff. And she stumbled and fell over the edge of the
Oh my
building,
gosh.
and she was in the hospital for a couple of weeks. And she was able to donate her organs, her viable organs, because we were both organ
Okay.
donors.
Yeah.
And my butterfly is a memorial tattoo for my very best
Oh,
friend Kelly.
yeah.
I get to talk about her every day because someone's going to ask me about it, and
Yeah.
I honor her with my sobriety.
Yeah.
But from 25 to 35, things were very blurry,
Mhm.
and I had come down to Florida, dropped the kids off at the grandparents, and somehow I ended up, not somehow, I'm sure I looked for it. I ended up meeting some people who, are, from the street and from an area that you probably wouldn't see me in otherwise, but
Mhm.
they introduced me to the drug crack. And before then, I was drinking alcohol and I was taking ecstasy and I was doing cocaine and smoking weed and taking Xanax. But to me, I was able to keep the balls juggling in the air. Like I was
Mhm.
able to remain a part of society.
Yeah.
But once I started smoking crack, it took me completely out of the game. I never showed back up for my kids.
Mm.
I was in a hit and run in my car. I ditched my car at an abandoned house, and I was on the street,
Yeah.
homeless, and couldn't show up for a job. I couldn't even show up to be a high paid escort.
Wow.
It got really
Yeah.
dark really fast. And during that time was when was my lowest. That was my absolute lowest.
Mhm.
And one of the other girls that was out on the street, just like me, her kids were living at the grandparents' house. She's an addict, just like me, but
Mhm.
we were vying for a position where we were, and we both couldn't exist in the same space. And she jumped me, and she cut my face. I have a scar right
Okay.
here on my face. She cut my face
Yeah.
with a broken crack pipe, and that at 40 years old was the fear and the rock bottom that
Yeah.
that catapulted me. I call it God's gift of desperation.
Mhm.
You know
That
that
was the moment. That was the moment where you said, no more. Like
Yeah.
things need to change, and like bring us back to that exact moment. Like, what does that feel like? Because I'm sure there were moments before like you knew things needed to change, but you maybe weren't ready, or like you couldn't get the courage or the strength to do it. Like, what was it about that moment? What was that feeling like for you where you're just like, no more?
Before that moment, before my face got cut, I would walk the streets of South Florida prostituting myself, but I did it with this like chutzpah, with this arrogance of
Mhm.
like I was somebody and I was strong and I felt like a 7 foot linebacker. Like that's the type of like arrogance that I walked around with. And I would catch a glimpse of myself in like windows when I was passing by, like store windows, and I'd be like, still look good. Mind you, I was 50 pounds lighter, hadn't showered in days, but
Yeah.
like comparing myself to the other homeless people out there. And I'm like,
Right.
I'm still fine. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
And when my face got cut, I was, for the first time in my life, fearful,
Mhm.
vulnerable,
Mhm.
and I didn't have the arrogance that
Mhm.
had like filled me up all of
Yeah.
that time. And I was scared. I felt like a sitting duck. And
Yeah.
my face, vanity. Every time I
Right.
saw my reflection, there were stitches.
Wow.
And it was, everything was just totally different from that
Because
moment.
before that, even though you were living on the streets, you still were able to like maintain a certain image and perception of yourself. But
Yeah.
once your face was cut open, you at that point were like,
Mm-hmm.
self-esteem wasn't high enough to stay in that position anymore.
No, I was scared. As if
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a delusion for me to even think that I had self-esteem at all. But I was
Right.
just delusional, you know?
Right.
And so I was scared. I was fearful and vulnerable
Yeah.
for the very first time, what I perceived in my life.
And what steps did you start to take from that moment?
I had a beautiful encounter with someone that I had known in my past, and they were working at a treatment center and dragged me to treatment. And that was my first opportunity to even attempt to be in recovery. I didn't know what that was. I
Mhm.
just knew that things were unmanageable. I thought that they would teach me how to drink like a lady. I'm like, I'm going to sleep for a while, put on a little
Right.
weight, and I'm going to figure this out how I can do it on the weekends.
Yeah.
And
So was it a
before,
rehab or was it an AA or like what was it?
both. It was an
Oh,
in-house treatment center.
okay.
And at the end of the 28 days, they said, okay, you're being discharged. And I said, to where? Because this was 25-year long addiction and
Right.
self-will run riot. I didn't know how to live with integrity. I didn't know where
Especially
to
for
go.
28 days. Yeah.
Yeah. So I said, can you please find me a long-term recovery center with
Mm,
women only? Because I
mhm.
found that I didn't like being around the men in
Yeah.
the treatment center. I wasn't able to think about myself. It was just, I don't,
Distracting.
very
Yeah.
distracting. And because I use men to get what I want. That's what I've
Right.
always done. So I found myself like in that manipulation mindset.
Yes.
And so they found a place, 3 months. And after 4.5 months of treatment, they moved me into what we have down here in Florida called halfway houses, where you can
Mhm.
live with other women who are now doing the right thing in recovery. And you guys can all support one another, get a
Mhm.
job, learn how to live. Within 2 weeks of being in the halfway house, I jumped on one of those sugar daddy seeking arrangement websites and thought that I was well enough to
Mhm.
do that without drinking and do it with integrity.
Mhm.
So I went out on my first date, and when the waitress walked up to the table, she goes, "Hi, you guys, how you doing? Would you like red or white?" And I said, "Red." Just boom. I'm in a
Boom.
halfway house. I'm getting drug tested. I'm getting
Mhm.
breathalyzed, but
Yeah.
I drank, and within like 3 drinks, I was like just chomping at the bits to get away from that table and go find my drug of choice, which is
Uh,
crack. So that's
yeah.
what I did.
Okay.
I went out on like a 6 month run,
Yeah.
and things got really bad really fast. And I reached out to someone that I had met in the recovery 6 months prior, and
Okay.
they scholarshiped me into another place, and I
Wow.
was there for 30 days.
Okay.
The thing that I did differently that time
Mm.
was commit to living in a halfway house for a year. I'm like, okay, one thing I know how to do is do what I've been doing. What I don't know how to do is what I need to learn.
Yeah.
So I entered into the halfway house. I got a sponsor. I was, working my AA spiritual principles, my steps, and
Mhm.
about halfway through, I met this guy. And I'm like, oh, there's my new higher power.
Yes.
I was obsessed. He was 10 years younger than me, was really built with abs and just this gift of gab and just fine. And my body was
Yeah.
like, uh-huh,
Yeah.
this is what we're doing
I
now.
found
And
him.
and because I had been so numb
Mhm.
and in another world in my mind for so long, I hadn't been really attracted to anyone in a long time because I was always with someone for other reasons.
Right.
So I'm like, wow, this is what this is supposed to feel like. Wow,
Mhm.
this is it. Mind you, I'm 6 weeks, sober,
Right.
and I have no tools to be in a relationship
Mhm.
at all. But I put my claws into that unassuming young man and
Yeah.
said, "You're mine." And
Yeah.
I took with that everything that unhealed soul had to offer me, the other unhealed soul.
Mhm. So you're both sober.
Yeah,
Okay.
we were both sober, and I did stay in the halfway house for a year, and then he and I moved in together. My kids began to get back in my life. I was
Okay.
working as a hairstylist. I'm learning the value of a dollar.
Yeah.
Went really well for me really quickly in that industry,
Yeah.
and we ended up getting married.
Okay.
And I thought, oh my gosh, I've totally figured this sober, integral life thing out. I don't need AA anymore. I'm not going to do
Yeah.
that anymore because I've figured it out. All you need to do
Mhm.
is establish a life for yourself that you're not willing
Mhm.
to give up, and you're not going to drink.
Right. And
Ding.
have a solid have a solid partner to do
Yeah,
it with.
I
Yeah.
win.
Yeah.
And we ended up moving out to LA.
Mhm.
And while we were out in LA, my husband told me that he thinks he's transgender.
The only reason I'm not freaking out more is because I know more of your story about this, and I'm left wondering in that moment is like, were there signs leading up to that
Yeah,
that you
yeah.
maybe had like clues or flags that you ignored, like looking back, or was that a total shock for you?
Definitely not a total shock. The word transgender was a shock. That word had never been a thought in my mind, nor had it been a part of any of our conversations. It had been nowhere. But what had been apparent were the cross dressing and the outside of the box sexual request, the not even talking about the details of it all, but my feelings in my body continued to tell me that, I don't like this. I don't feel like this is honoring me. But I thought I
Mhm.
could control it and fix it. I thought I could
Yeah.
fix him because I'm the boss. I have Boss Doss tattooed on my
Boss,
knuckles.
boss, boss, boss can control any situation.
Especially with men. I know
Yes.
how to do this. I know how to make
Right.
this go exactly the way that I need it to go.
Yeah.
And I would manipulate the situations by doing things that like this I had amassed this toolbox over my lifetime, and I would shame and withhold sex and threaten to leave, and I would do all of the things that I've always done to make him just kowtow to my demands.
Mhm.
And it had worked and worked and worked until
Until it
finally
didn't.
things like nothing that I could do was making this moving train stop. Like, and I was heartbroken because it made me feel like I wasn't valuable. I couldn't believe that there was something that I couldn't control or
Right.
fix.
And so this was 6 years in, right? To
Yes.
you dating and being together and now being married. Like,
Mhm.
what was what were the options in that moment? Did she
Mhm.
want to stay together and work things
Yeah.
out?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I didn't care about my partner telling me they were transgender. What I cared about is that they wanted to change. I
Mm,
couldn't believe that the person that I was so sexually attracted to and loved so much wanted to change. I was baffled.
yeah.
I couldn't believe it. I'm like, but this is what I like. Like literally my
Right.
vagina like talks for this person. And I thought it was amazing to me.
Yeah.
Mind you, professional bodybuilder, 10 years younger than me. I mean,
Mm,
Italian tattoos, like, ah.
yeah.
I'm like, and I love you and you've got me. So why would you change?
Right.
I have put up with everything that you've dished out at me. Like you owe me.
So did it become like a battle back and forth? Like how eventually did you end up giving up control?
Well, I left LA and I came back to Delray Beach where we had met, but there's a big
Yeah.
recovery scene. And shaming and manipulating and leaving. I just assumed that the person I married would leave LA and come to Florida and be like, oh my God, I'm so
I'm
sorry.
sorry. I want you back.
I was thinking, and I
Yeah.
just waited for that. But in the meantime, mind you, I'm an alcoholic and I had no real recovery or spirituality or anything going for me. And I was completely out of control. Like the
Mhm.
vibrating and trembling in my body during that time was so out of control. I could barely stand behind the chair and do hair. My
Yeah.
hands were shaking. I'm teared up.
And you're trying to stay sober.
I was out of my mind.
Yeah.
I thought that I had been sober long enough that I could drink like a normie.
Mm.
So after dinner one night, not after dinner, well, I went to dinner and I decided at dinner, I'm going to have a 6 ounce pour of wine because I know that's going to give me the peace and ease that I need. And it
Yeah.
did. I said, I'm going to leave a little bit in the glass because I see people doing that and they do it easily. I'm like, I can
Mhm.
do that. And I did. The
Wow.
second night, I'm going to
Yeah.
have 2 6 ounce pours and I'm going to leave a little bit in the second one. I did that. And it was definitely making me feel better. Of course,
Right.
it's always been my solution.
Right.
The next night, I'm going to have a 9 ounce pour. I'm going to leave a little bit in the glass. That night, I had 2 9 ounce pours. Nothing was left in the glass. I hightailed it from my steak dinner to the bodega where I knew exactly I could get what I wanted.
Yeah.
And it started all again. So
The
to
cycle.
think that my face getting cut was not really my rock bottom is
Mm.
crazy to me.
Yeah.
Because there I was again, doing the exact same thing that led me there.
Yeah.
My higher power, which is my husband, had completely left me down. My theory of just create the life that you want and you'll stay sober was
Mm.
bullshit. And I
Mm.
was out of control.
Yeah.
I started smoking crack and I became a maniac once again, complete maniac for like 6 months. I'm not showing up to work. I get kicked out of the house that I was living in. The HOA kicked me out for suspicious behavior.
Mhm.
Of course they did. And I was now living in a hotel. And I thought that's exactly where I needed to be, just in a dark hotel with my crack pipe. And I don't remember this conversation, but during all that time, I'm yelling and screaming at my ex on the FaceTime camera, look what you're making me do.
Mhm.
And I just knew that because, that person knew how bad it could get for me, that they would say, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'll stop doing this. Just don't do this. That never happened. I couldn't believe it.
Mm. That victim mentality, right? Like, look what you're doing to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought that
Stop.
would be the
Yeah.
Hail Mary tool
Yeah.
to get them, to get that person to submit to my demand.
Right. Right.
But what that person did do is come here to Florida from LA and get me out of that hotel and took me to their parents' house, sobered me up for a few days and said, I'm not leaving until you're in a stable situation.
Mm.
And I went back into a halfway house and
Yeah.
stayed there for 3 months, got a sponsor, started working some
Mhm.
steps. And then I'm
Mhm.
like, I'm good. I'm feeling better. I'm going to therapy. I'm doing hypnotherapy and doing inner child workshops. What I really wanted when my mind started clearing from drugs and alcohol, I started to feel like something was wrong with me, that I couldn't unconditionally accept what was happening to this person that I love. I thought
Mhm.
something was wrong with me. Like I need to heal whatever this is. I need to dissect the fabric of my cloth and figure out why this isn't working for me. Because I was still like this. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm going to figure this out because I want to be with this person. Because at this point, this
Mhm.
person hadn't changed
Mm.
much. And
Yes.
you know what I mean? It was a real
Yeah.
I'm hearing the words that you're saying, but I'm seeing the
Right.
person
But
I'm
you still
seeing.
look the same. Yeah.
There were definitely some changes, but
Okay.
I could still handle all that. But
Yeah.
I could handle it. But I went on this journey to figure out what was wrong with me
Mhm.
because that narrative that my parents had given me when I was a kid, that I was born bad and I was mean, was piping in my head. If
Mhm.
you can't accept this person that loves you and that you love, you are bad. You are mean. And I sat in that shit for like a year.
Mhm.
trying to decide what was wrong with me. And I had done some work with one of my sponsors, and it's just like, your resentments, and you really dig deep into your part in the resentment. And this beautiful gift was just laid down upon my feet, that my resentment towards this person was just my unmet expectation of how I think they should show up in the world for me. And
Mhm.
it just made me so sad because I wanted
Yeah.
that person to stay who I wanted them to stay, but I was being so selfish.
Right.
And
Kind of so often, like who we want this person to be, we get upset when they're not being who we want them to be.
yeah, and I'd always been able to in my lifetime to just like mold people into doing what, especially men, like doing what I want them to do. And if you don't do that, then you don't get to hang out with me. And then,
Mm.
and they'd always, catered to that. So it was really interesting that I wasn't able to do that. And it was this universal, God-given opportunity to investigate myself and be better, do better, be aware of how I show up in the world and what my expectations are for
Yeah.
people. And the delusion that I live in, that I have the power to control and fix, as if people need
Yeah.
to be fixed. And if it's
Right.
like it's my job.
Right. The lesson to like let go and allow and to focus on you instead of trying to change others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had to be okay with not being okay with what was happening. It was
Mhm.
okay for me not to want to be with the new person. And it didn't mean that I was bad or mean or
Yeah.
unevolved or not spiritual. It's okay. And so the year following that, when I felt more relieved, I really tried hard to be friends and show
Mhm.
up, and we would talk on the FaceTime camera every Sunday, and I watched this transition happen. And I wanted to do that, but my body continued to tell me, we're not doing this. It's time to go over here now.
Yeah.
This is settled. Go.
Yeah.
But I banged my head against that wall for a whole flipping year, up until maybe
Wow.
three weeks ago.
3 weeks ago.
About 3 weeks
Wow.
ago,
Wow.
I decided, like, I'm really gonna honor what my body, which I believe is God's source,
Yeah.
is telling me. It's
Yeah.
time. It's time to go.
Yeah. You know what's so interesting that I'm like hearing and thinking now is you both were going through your own transformation like in that time separately, and you were connecting once a week, but you were like moving away from envisioning yourself with that person sexually,
Mm.
and they were going through their own transformative process into the person they wanted to become. And
There
so that's
were,
kind of beautiful how you like held space for each other in that time to eventually kind of move a little bit more in your own separate directions.
to be honest, I wish I hadn't held that space for as long as I did. I, I did it because I saw the consequences that this person that I deeply care for daily had to go through with
Yeah.
friends and families and loved ones. And I didn't want to be another consequence, because that person does not deserve any consequences,
Mhm. Yeah.
period. And I
Yeah.
didn't want to be another consequence,
Mhm.
but I wasn't acknowledging what was true for me. When
Right.
my body tells me I'm uncomfortable in a situation, that's it. That's
That's it.
that's
Yeah.
that's it. And
That's
it's
it.
not personal.
Yeah.
It's personal to me.
Right. Listen to your intuition. It's so important.
And it, for a lifetime, I didn't know what that was. I
Yeah.
didn't know. I couldn't trust it. If I
Mhm.
felt something strange, I'm like, ugh, whatever. And I would just go, just power through. And I found myself doing that up until recently, just
Yeah.
powering through. My head saying do it, my body
Right.
saying no.
Yeah. So I like to this connection between like mind, heart, thoughts, words, like to ensure that what we're thinking, saying, doing, and feeling are all in alignment. And it sounds like that's like where you've arrived. And I want to hear more about your rebuilding process because you're now a recovery coach. So you've come out this other side. You're now helping other people who may be going through something similar, maybe not the exact same situations you've been in, but like, what does it feel like to now be able to help others who are struggling or suffering and to feel like you are now this like beacon of light and transformative guide?
Purposeful.
Yeah.
Purposeful. When all else fails, or when any of my entrepreneurial endeavors don't go as I see fit, I always have purpose because I have been where I can guide others to get out of. And being willing to consistently go back into that fire is a lot of bravery, a lot of resilience, and it gives me purpose. When I help other women through their steps, and I'm being a sponsor, being accountable to them, and they hear me talk and they're like, oh my gosh, she can do it, I can too. That's
Mm-hmm.
purpose. That's
Yeah.
God purpose. That's not self-will, that's service.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the most important steps you feel like that really helped you rebuild yourself?
Spirituality, having a higher power, realizing that I'm not in control, and clearing the wreckage of my past, clearing all the bullshit out so that I can like trust myself with, God's source, and
Yeah.
having so much faith that it's all been for something.
Yeah.
There are things that have happened along the way, and I've lived long enough now to know
Mm-hmm.
that when I'm praying for something, it is in God's time. And
Mm-hmm.
there's so many different types of weird things are going to need to happen along the way before something I prayed for years ago appears. But it
Yes.
always does, just never in the time and the space and the way that I thought.
Yeah. So you try and force and control it and we want it on a specific timeline, but you need to release control of the time, and trust that when you put it out there, when you have faith, it's all working for you.
Yeah, that there's something that's really exciting that's happened with me recently. It's when I'm excited about something, I pursue it like to the fullest, but I do it with no expectation,
Yeah.
and it relieves
Mm-hmm.
pressure of any of the outcome of anything. And I've noticed that like I get so much confirmation and affirmation from the universe and from people when
Yeah.
I'm moving in that way.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And you've truly turned your mess into your message.
Oh yeah.
How can other people start to do that? Because I think so many people are just like, my life is a mess. I don't see the light. Like, I'm so frustrated. This is going on or this happened. How can they start to shift that?
I mean, thinking living in like a terminally unique mindset is the death of us all. You're not unique. The details of your story may be a little bit unique, but you're not the only one.
Yeah.
And when you are the only one and you live in your shit, there's shame that's living in there with you. But something that I did when I was going through all this, I would like hashtag things on Instagram so I could connect with other people and find other people that were experiencing something like me. But if you don't talk about it, and if you don't be vulnerable, no one's going to find you. Because when you think you're unique, you're just going to be by yourself and think that you're the only one going through what you're going through, when
Yeah.
really everyone's been through everything before.
Yeah. So I think that some of the biggest things that have helped what it sounds like for you is like number one, sobriety.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, like community and having others who support you and to share your message with. And number three, like opening up about your story and being
Oh,
super vulnerable and raw.
yeah. There's no shame that lives here anymore.
Yeah.
I'm on the other side of that. And
Yeah.
when you're not shameful, you have the authority to speak about what you've been through, and you are the authority. People don't understand how much power lives in every step you've ever taken, every emotion you've ever felt. You are the authority on that specific thing,
Yeah.
which gives you the right to talk about it and help
Yeah.
others from exactly where you've been.
I think it's so beautiful to watch someone like you stand in their authentic truth and be like, here's what I've been through. Here's what I've learned. And now I want to help you based on what I've went through. I'm not sitting here like ashamed or anything on the decisions I've made, but I'm like, wow, look at how far I've come. And now like I can speak on it and I can lift others up and I can share and I can help because look what I've been through.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know.
it's
I've
really
never thought
powerful.
I'd be so grateful to have such a salacious tale.
Yeah. It's quite the story. And now I know you have a book coming out
I do.
too called
Mhm.
the Unbossing when the life you choose doesn't choose you.
Mhm.
Congratulations, number one.
Thank
Number
you.
two, what messages do you hope readers will take away from this book?
When I first started writing the book, I wanted to write about my husband coming out as transgender. And what it morphed into as I did more work on myself is all of the things that every woman I've ever met does in a relationship. We all do the same things. We handpick someone because we're turned on by them. And there's like butterflies or something. And we take on everything they have to dish out, thinking we can control it and fix it. And when we're not able to, we feel unworthy, unsexy. Why can't they love me like I want to be loved? When in actuality, that's just not the person for you. And it's okay. It's okay to exit stage left and continue your journey and become the person that you would like to meet in another person. And it's just a
Yeah.
brave self-investigation. So that's how the book, like, it took
Mm,
this turn, this beautiful turn of like
mhm,
boundaries. Like, it's
mhm.
okay to let go of relationships that don't honor your boundaries because it opens the door for relationships that will.
Amen.
It's the only way to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And listen, so much of it is us wanting to blame them for it not working out. But what you really have to do in those moments is forgive yourself for allowing the boundaries not to be respected, forgiving yourself for not speaking up when something didn't feel right, forgive yourself for continuing to stay when you knew it wasn't perhaps a match. And so I think this is such an incredible book, and so many women are going to benefit from reading it. So I can't wait for that to come out.
I'm excited. We're set to publish. I guess it'll be about maybe 2 months from now,
Okay. So
maybe less.
soon.
Yeah.
So soon. Yay. Um, Allison, as we begin to wrap up, is there anything you'd like to leave our audience with today?
If your body is telling you that your boundaries are being crossed, they are, honor that. And
Listen
it's
to
okay
that.
for you to decide who you want to be with, who you want to
Mhm.
show up in the world as, where you want to work. It's okay to change that too. You can change whenever you want to without an explanation given to anyone.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. And where can our listeners find you?
Instagram, I love my Instagram. It's at the real boss Doss. And my website is AllisonDoss.com.
Mhm. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Lauren.